welcome to LoveBabz, Love Talk on WNHH FM. Good morning, the beginning of a great week. The sun's out. I think spring might actually be finally here. And this is not Babz Rawls-Ivy, the host of LoveBabz, Love Talk. She's at a storytelling conference this week, and I'm sure she's going to blow the place away, given how great she tells stories. And I'm Paul Bass, filling in to hold the fort down along with Harry Droz. It was a big political weekend in Connecticut, along within the country, as the 2022 election season kicks into high gear. And we're bringing a familiar voice back on WNHH, Jason the Greek, a.k.a. Jason Paul, who has been handicapping races for many years in Connecticut and beyond, to kind of help us get a handle on where we're headed and how our things are looking. Jason Paul, thanks a lot for making time to come on WNHH FM.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. It was an exciting convention weekend, and I'm ready to get into it and answer any questions that you might have.
I want to go to the weeds down the ticket in a few minutes, but the big top of the ticket races are governor and Senate. We have a rematch coming in Connecticut with Ned Lamont, a one-term governor. Democrat is running again. He was unopposed within his party, which was interesting. And Bob Stefanowski, who last time ran against him as a Republican, lost a pretty close race. Was last time, I think he had 5 or 6 opponents within the party. It was a hard-fought primary. This time he had the lane cleared for him. He's come back, learned some stuff from last time. Ned Lamont's a different candidate this time too. And I just want to see how you feel about how's this rematch looking to you?
So from where I sit, this is a very hard race for Stefanowski. But if I looked, as me want to do, I went back and looked at the numbers. And really, Lamont's margin last time came not entirely, but of the 43,000 votes he won by, about 41 of them came from New Haven and Hartford combined. And then in the rest of the state, they battled it out to basically a draw.
How many percent was that 41,000?
It was 3.2%.
All right, so that's a healthy margin.
It's not a real margin, but it's not as close as the last 2 governor's races.
Right.
But it still was far and away the closest race in the state. AG was next, and that was like almost 6. So really, I think that there very much was a Malloy hangover in that race. That sort of 8 years of Dan Malloy was not overly loved by the electorate in Connecticut. But now I think Lamont has had, 3 good years on his own terms. And a lot of the major problems that people didn't like in terms of like the budget and taxes and all of those issues, the most recent session, they passed tax cuts, not overwhelmingly large ones, but not nothing ones. The budget's in much better shape because of stock market gains combined with massive amounts of federal aid related to COVID, and things are just in a better direction.
Right. Lamont's had a strong first term. People tend to be pleased with the fact that we have a surplus. I mean, it's been raining money from Washington. They like that he dealt with COVID seriously. We're a state that wanted to take COVID seriously. And, the Democrats are doing those cheap tax cut, just through December 1st, they're cutting gas tax 25 cents, which is going to save people a few bucks, prevent them from funding more important things like childcare, but make it look like they could take away that tax cut issue from the Republicans. But Jason, while I'm agreeing with you about Lamont being in a stronger position than he was last time, I'd like to offer a little bit different take about last time. In Connecticut, we've been electing only Democrats to Congress now for I think it's been more than 20 years. And basically, we're a
6 was the last election in which a Republican got elected.
Yeah, so we were a very blue state, but not for governor. Yes, we've had governor the last 3 ones we had Democrats, but we had 20 years without a Democrat. And I remember when Toby Moffett was trying to run for governor in 86, Stanley Greenberg's polling was saying that people want to see a banker for governor and a fighter for Congress. And that's, independents are the largest block of voters in Connecticut. As you mentioned, they weren't that happy with Malloy, although I'd argue he had a pretty good run, but he wasn't popular. But you're leaving out the Trump factor. My take on that race was Lamont was an incredibly weak candidate. He had bought the nomination The only person running against him in the nomination in the end was Joe Ganim, who was out of federal prison and you couldn't have been a serious candidate. And then I think the Republicans would have won that race if not for the deep desire in 2018 for not just Democrats, but Republicans to vote against Donald Trump in some form. I mean, that was a national outpouring of Democratic votes. I thought Lamont was a cold candidate. He inspired nobody. He just bought it. But Stefanowski just ran a bad campaign. He's advised by Arthur Laffer. He might be the last person in America who believes in the Laffer curve. He wanted to eliminate the income tax. He seemed kind of out of touch. He has this time moderated that position. He's not calling for ending the income tax. I agree with you. The Democrats are taking the tax issue somewhat off the table with their cheap election year tax cut. But this time, Donald Trump's not really going to be motivating a big vote. Although I want to ask you if you think Roe will. And Biden is deeply unpopular with independents. He's not as unpopular as Trump was. Trump was a jihad, right? People wanted to vote against Trump last time, and any Democrat they could find, they were pouring out. I don't think it'll be the same thing with Biden, but you don't think there might be a factor that Biden will hurt Lamont somewhat with the independent voters, and that Stefanowski might be a little smarter this time, while Lamont's also stronger this time because he's had a pretty successful term. What's your take on that?
So my thought when it comes to, I think Biden's numbers in general would make things more challenging for Democrats across the board when we get to sort of the national picture. But in Connecticut, one of the problems that Stefanowski has in making the math work is there were still places in Connecticut where it was 2012 Romney number in the governor's race. So if you look at like Darien and New Canaan, where Murphy was able to win New Canaan and barely lose Darien, Stefanowski hit 60s there. But these are places where Biden ended up winning by more than 20 points. So it's not the sort of, and this is just sort of, there are a lot of these kinds of voters. And Stefanowski was able to get a lot of people who did that on sort of on team in this election. Not enough, but it was sort of kind of there. Holding that sort of when the Republican Party is still not in Connecticut overwhelmingly, but still nationally kind of Trumpy is hard in Connecticut. And really, it's sort of where do you so maybe you get the Hartford New Haven margin down to 35 instead of 40.
But he is hoping. He is going to try. He's campaigning this time in New Haven. He didn't last time. Right. He's hoping to get that margin down. But I think you identified something really important here, which is how do you navigate the Trump issue? The Republican base there's more Trump support than there used to be in Connecticut in the Republican base, but you can't win with that in Connecticut. We saw in Guilford when they tried the critical race theory stuff with the Board of Ed, they lost 2-1, and that was Guilford. And I think Stefanowski knows that. I'll be curious how they navigate that, Jason, because they do have a Secretary of State candidate they nominated who seems to be sympathetic to stop the steal. I'm not sure how directly. They haven't resolved that they're going to have a Senate primary in which the parties endorsed them as clarities this past weekend, who was not Trump type person. She's a moderate, but Leora Levy is backed by Ron McDaniel and some of the Trump wing of the faction party and Peter Lamage. How do you think that's going to play out? Are people going to feel like they're voting that the Republicans are a Trump ticket despite Stefanowski's efforts to try to do what the Virginia governor did?
Look, the thing is, I think it's hard. I think it's a chat. I think to some degree, separating the Republican brand entirely from Trump is hard.
Well, I don't think he'll try entirely. He'll try to navigate it the way they did in Virginia.
But the thing is that unlike Trump, in Virginia, there are Trumpy areas, very serious Trumpy areas that you can get more turnout out of, you can benefit from, and sort of it's more of a dance. In Connecticut, with the exception of like the Waterbury suburbs, there really aren't Trumpy areas. And
for a general election, yeah, I got your point.
In a general election, there just aren't really Trumpy areas. Maybe Killingly,
And the polling has showed, in my understanding, that independents in Connecticut, which are the big prize, right, in the general election, they're the biggest block of voters, they, in the past, have been very anti-Trump. Do you think that's still true? And do you think an anti-Biden sentiment is going to moderate that in this election?
Look, I think definitely unaffiliated voters are both ways, but I really do think you have to somewhat segregate out sort of different kinds of unaffiliated and different kinds of those sorts of voters, because there's sort of an upscale Romney loving group of voters in Connecticut. A lot of towns where Romney improved pretty markedly on what McCain got in 2008. And those voters had utter unimaginable Trump aversion. And, Hillary Clinton won Darien and New Canaan for the first time for a Democrat ever. And then New Canaan went from being the most Republican city or town in Connecticut in 12 to being more Democratic than the state as a whole in 2020.
Wow.
So
wow, that's
that level, so you have those sort of voters, and then you sort of have, I would say, sort of your Enfield, Killingly, sort of Eastern Connecticut, on the other side of the state, like Southington and Burlington, which stayed voting for Trump.
And then you got the Naugatuck Valley, which is very interesting, which is the opposite of Fairfield County, because that's a less elite area. They're more pro-Trump, including Democrats and former Democrats. I wonder how that's going to play in the U.S. Senate and House races. George Logan is putting a pretty spirited challenge against Johanna Hayes. Logan's the Republican. She's the Democrat. He's black. She's black. The district is not. And he does pretty well with Trump voters. He's pretty far right, but he has a very moderate image. Do you think Hayes is in trouble as a first-term congressperson in the last district that had a Republican congressperson and elected Gary Franks in the past?
She's on to her. She's running for her third term.
I apologize. Thanks.
Yeah. And look, in a truly dreadful national environment, Johanna Hayes could be in trouble. Dreadful for Democrats. Sorry, I sometimes forget the pundit hat. But in a bad cycle for Democrats, Hayes could be in trouble. But I think one of the problems is that seat is not the Gary Franks seat anymore.
It's been redistricted.
Because when the merging happened, when we lost a seat in 20 to 22, they had to put in about the merging of the seats. And you're talking like Simsbury, Avon, Farmington, and New Britain, and those sort of things. And Logan is mostly carpetbagging his way into the seat. I don't think that will play a huge amount of role, but it does make it a bit harder. And I just think one of the questions that there is Logan going to get the money needed to be on TV and competitive in a serious way?
And I guess that'll be up to the RNC, right? Republican National Committee.
I mean, sort of.
How much are they targeting this race?
They're saying they're targeting it a bit, but the proof remains to be in the pudding in terms of waiting to see Logan's hard dollar amount, because you can't do the whole race with outside independent expenditure money. Logan is going to need to raise like at least $1 million in hard money to be competitive. And I think the last reporting was like 100,000.
Oh, wow. So maybe it sounds like they're not pulling from. We're talking to Jason the Greek, Jason Paul. He's our handicapper for state races and the national political picture. He looks at the numbers, crunches the numbers, looks at the historical patterns in our vote to try to help us make sense of 2022, which is shaping up as a very interesting year. I'm Paul Bass filling in for Babs Rawls-Ivy on WNHH-FM's LoveBabz, Love Talks. Dick Blumenthal was renominated for, I guess, a third term by the Democrats this weekend. He's going to face a spirited challenge. Demis Clarity's won the endorsement of the Republican Party. She's a moderate. I think she's pro-choice from the Valley, which is a lot of those people off grabs. But often, I've been told that people like us, the pundits, the insiders, might overestimate the statewide potential for people who are state legislative candidates. We're going to get that with Maine. You've written about this, Jason. So Themis Clarides was a Republican leader and a state legislator, very successful, both solidly conservative and very good at working bipartisan with Democrats. And they worked on a great budget deal that both sides really liked her last term in. And her pitch is she can get those moderates, but the Republicans always have that challenge that in the primaries they go right. So she's facing, it might help her that she faces two right-wing challengers in a primary. And this is really going to be the primary to watch this August. She's going to be facing Peter Lamage and Laura. I'm sorry, I always forget her name.
Levy?
Yeah, Levy. What's your take on that race? Is it going to end up being Clarides? Is Blumenthal in trouble? Are people tired of him as an incumbent?
Look, I think she's going to get through the primary. I think it's sort of when they sort of like make their choice, if there was one, I would be more interested in it. So long as there are two, it's very hard to make the math work.
For the challengers tours, you're saying when there are two right challengers, it's hard to beat
challengers, but I think the Roe announcement takes sort of, I never thought it was going to be much of a race, but I really think it sort of takes the starch out of the Republicans.
So you're talking about the Roe versus Wade, the expected decision by Supreme Court if they continue with the draft opinion to get rid of Roe versus Wade and national legal abortion.
Even if they come back with just the Mississippi thing, in Connecticut, you've raised the salience of
abortion,
and really all church and state issues.
And I think we could agree that that's a winning. That it's not clear nationally how big that's going to play out because different states are different. The pundits are saying that the states that Democrats really care about, like Pennsylvania, Michigan, it's going to help them to motivate a base. But people's views on abortion are very complicated when you dig deep. They actually contradict themselves about what it should be at 6 weeks and whether it should be life of the baby. And they say the opposite thing. In Connecticut, I know the Republicans are trying hard not to talk about abortion because they've won the issue, but they don't appeal to the middle on that. Are you saying that Roe versus Wade pretty much gets Blumenthal reelected, even though he might be running against a pro-choice Republican?
Yeah, I don't think being a pro-choice Republican is going to be enough. When Mitch McConnell went on TV and said a federal abortion ban was possible. I understand Themis is going to say, I'm not going to be for that. I'm pro-choice. This is not an issue. But at the end of the day, when you make separation of church and state issues particularly important, Connecticut is a quite secular state. Our white evangelical number is one of the lowest in the country. And there's just not a lot of appetite for any sense of right-wing social values. And again, winning Republican statewide candidates need to find a way to get Greenwich, Darien, and New Canaan back. Those three towns combined used to provide Republicans with 20,000, I don't think it was 20, but 15,000 net of 15,000 votes from those three. And
that's
states.
partly a class thing. So you think that the Republicans aren't going to, because they're running hard on youth crime, on inflation. You don't think that those, and the general popular Biden, you don't think that those issues will be enough to turn some people back in? And also in Greenwich, they're very upset down there about Democratic efforts to regionalize affordable housing. That's actually a motivating issue down there.
Yeah, no, I don't think I think there's some, but basically it's not a matter of can they win them. It's the absolute margin to win them by, because this is the same secret sauce that I wrote all the way back in 2012 12 when I talked about Murphy and winning a statewide
We're
race.
talking about the three M's: Meriden, Middletown.
That was in 10 for the primary. I'm talking about Murphy when you talk about Murphy in the general, what basically you have sort of base Democratic towns that will perform, and then how do you come up with how do you counter the existence of those cities and towns to cut back your margin so that you can actually get over to win a statewide race. And
so, Jason, you sound really confident that the Democrats are solid in Connecticut this election year. You don't think there's any dangers on any of the races to them losing?
I think there's always in a bad national year, it is always possible for things to go wrong for Democrats. However, one thing to remember is 10 was a bad national year, and Blumenthal won by 12. I want to say it was 11 or 12.
Against someone who had $50 million but wasn't a great candidate.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I do not. Themis, in theory, could be a better candidate than Linda McMahon because Linda McMahon very much had I'm here, I'm buying it, leave me alone. And turns out that didn't work. But still, Blumenthal won, Malloy won. None of the House races got particularly close in 10. Same deal for 14. So I'm not saying no. It's not. I don't want to say, oh, it's impossible or early and the races bear watching. But even with that being said, it's just the math in all of these races is hard because the Republicans need to appeal to two very different constituencies. Sort of the, downscale, angry people in eastern parts of the state and in the Waterbury suburbs, just sort of people who like Trump, people who voted for Trump by more than they voted for Obama. And then also desperately need to get back Romney, people who voted for Romney and then Clinton and Biden. People who voted for Romney and Clinton and then Biden don't really their stock market gains probably help them ride out whatever they're losing to inflation. And they don't obviously they don't like crime, but I don't think the crime rates in their areas are spiking.
You're talking Gold Coast, talking Lower Fairfield County, Greenwich, Darien.
Yes, I'm talking about sort of basically all the people. I mean, all the places where, Clinton ran better in 16 than Obama ran in 12.
We're talking to Jason the Greek, political strategist and analyst, number cruncher Jason Paul, about the 2022 election. So, Jason, you're obviously on the view that Democrats are in good shape in Connecticut this year. Obviously not nationally. You've written and others that the party's having a real problem stopping the bleeding among a big chunk of what used to be its base, white working class voters and specifically rural voters, which they're not even trying to get sometimes. And you recently wrote, what was it, a book or a paper about?
I'm writing a book, and then I also wrote a chapter in it is about the Maine Senate race.
The Maine Senate race, meaning last 2020, was Susan Collins. Yes. Blew away a Democrat people thought was going to win because of the anti-Trump sentiment in that state, but she won by 8.6% for Senate as a Republican in the same year that Biden won Maine by 9.3%. So that was dramatic. You drew a bunch of lessons. There's a Maine state senator who drew a bunch of lessons that aren't quite the same as yours, not completely different in the New York Times yesterday. So I want to go back over that with you. So I read what you wrote. It was very interesting. You wrote, quote, the Democratic Party's done little to figure out what went wrong in Maine, which is political malpractice, given the stakes in 2022. Maine Senate race is the only one in the last two presidential elections to produce a result at odds with the one at the top of the ticket, meaning Collins, a senator, won as a Republican when Biden won handily as a Democrat. Pure partisan politics did not dictate the outcome, as it often does. So with you're talking about like Ron Johnson, the Republican of Wisconsin, who should be vulnerable running as a senator in a state that could vote for a Democratic president. You're saying you got to learn what went wrong in Maine for the Democrats if they want to have any chance of holding on to the Senate this year and winning some of these tough purple races, correct?
Yes.
So what do you draw? You said candidate selection is important. What were the main lessons of the
So
Susan Collins race?
the key thing is there has been a Democratic strategy, that windowless room, windowless basement strategy. It basically means what we need to do is throw our candidate into a room, have them raise as much money as possible, then use all of that money for negative television advertisements, and that is how you win. And all sort of, it is impossible to engage voters in any other way at scale that makes it worth it. And that was the strategy that it was employed. And that strategy is seriously flawed, because the money that you get that way can be used to argue, that you, by spending all that time, you're not really of the place. And sort of this does get into the esotericness of sort
You're
of.
saying you got out there meeting people. Linda McMahon having $50 million couldn't buy the race. But you do need money. I mean, there's no doubt you need money. They got those senators and congressmen dialing for dollars the second they begin a term for the next term.
Right, but the point is absolutely the basic. You always need money. But what I talk about a lot, the major point I would make about money is you need money to get to name rec saturation. That means everyone has to know who you are. Because if they don't,
then there's a point of diminishing returns. Like if Linda McMahon could have done that with 20 million instead of 50.
Yeah, 50 twice.
Yeah.
The point is that, like, Linda McMahon in her first 50 million bought herself name rec saturation forever. So, sort of when you have what amounts to, the stat that I pulled from 10, which I always sort of loved, was in the first congressional district, Blumenthal got 59 and McMahon got 41. And the Republican challenger to Larson, who spent, I want to say, $500,000, got 37 to Larson's 60. So all of the monetary.
You need money to get to the table, but then the diminishing returns. Like Sarah Gideon, who ran against Collin, had $120 million in outside money.
She raised 75, and then there was
outside money.
Outside money was another huge thing. And the point is, at the end of the day, it was jujitsu'd against her, because I'm like, Connecticut has some of this, but we're also still more people move in and out, particularly when you include the Fairfield County area. There's not sort of
you also said something interesting.
The whole second.
You said something really interesting.
More like the second congressional district.
In that chapter, Jason, you mentioned anointing a candidate. So the state party leaders anointed Sarah Gideon. She was a state legislative leader, and they thought she'd be strong statewide. They were wrong. They didn't have a primary. The conventional thinking is that primaries hurt, that you get ripped up by your own party, you're not together going into the general. Were you suggesting what some people suggest, that John DeStefano believes, is that primaries actually strengthen the party because it exposes what your vulnerabilities are going to be? You get to deal with them early on, and people are hearing about you because you're running a primary. Do you think the Democrats would have done, and you find out who might do better, but other people say primaries reward your base and don't get you the moderates in the middle.
Well, there are two. Maine is unique in this way. One, Maine has ranked choice voting in their primaries, which means that you actually have to get to 50+1 of the electorate. So you can't run to the far. You can't take a far left base, get 30 and win. That doesn't work because of Maine's esoteric laws. I also think that in general, primaries are more advantageous, particularly if they're conducted relatively, not at the nastiest level. I think that sort of the DeStefano-Malloy primary in 10 I don't think was not in 10, sorry. In
Oh, six.
that primary got chippy at a level where I don't think it was beneficial. But I do think in general primaries are not as bad as people think. And one of the major reasons that primaries were viewed to be bad was, well, you're going to have to spend money that you do. You're going to have to spend a limited amount of money that you can't get back on a primary that you then can't use in the general, and so it's bad. But in all U.S. Senate races now, if the race is competitive, the money is going to be there. And in the main case, there was $4 million sitting in escrow that was going to the candidate who won, no matter what happened. So
then let's look at it. We're not gonna have a big primary this year in Connecticut. We'll have the Senate Republican side, nothing on Democrat, no governor candidate, and it's in August. And we're going to have a primary for treasurer in the Democratic Party, for Secretary of State. Are they going to get anyone to vote in those things? Will it have turned out to be smart to schedule a primary when no one will be around to vote? Is that going to help or hurt them?
I think that in Connecticut, down-ticket Democrats run a little bit better now than the top of the ticket. And I basically think it won't matter. They're all qualified. They're all decent candidates. They're all good enough. It's hard to imagine them losing. But to the answer to the question, is anybody going to vote in those primaries? The answer to that is no. The turnout.
What does that mean for treasurer? So you got to pull out your own people, right? So you're going to have three-way. You're going to have Dita, the financial analyst trader from Greenwich, going against Eric Russell, the kind of young Turk in New Haven, against Karen Du Bois Walton, who's also from New Haven and has a network across state of her own kind of people in housing and civil rights. How do you see that three-way treasurer race? And what's at stake there, if anything?
So I think it's interesting because I think Dita might win.
And why is that? Because there'll be so few people voting. It's who has the money to pull people out.
Well, no, it's not so much money. Everyone's going to qualify for public financing, and that's going to be sufficient. I think she got 43 against Wooden. And
in other words, she ran for state treasurer in her primary 4 years ago. People don't really pay attention to rate. Her base is Fairfield County, correct?
Yes.
Does Fairfield County vote in Connecticut primaries? Do they feel like part of Connecticut?
I think enough. I think her base is Fairfield County, but I'm saying is in general is you have sort of, I'm experienced. You basically have an argument. I'm experienced. I'm not bought. I'm not part of the party machine. I'm cool. I'm special. Love me. And then you have two African-American candidates from the same city kind of slugging it out.
Such different bases. It's really interesting. Eric Russell, who's in his young 30s, he has worked the party machinery. I mean, he's been vice president of the party. He surprised everyone with how fast he got endorsements from people really active in party politics and kind of a younger generation of it. Whereas Karen Du Bois Walton's in her I guess mid 50s. She has run the Housing Authority in New Haven for a lot of years. She's involved with Deltas, with civil rights groups, fair housing groups. So she kind of has the activists who aren't seen as sort of party insiders. But do you think there's still too much in common between the two that they'll split it?
I don't know if they'll split it exactly. I'm just saying is that a lot of the people who voted for Dita last time just see potentially no reason to change their mind, no reason to pay new attention, no reason to change their mind.
When you're saying 43 wins the primary, she won 43% last time.
Easily wins the primary if either of the other candidates are remotely competitive. So the point is that 36 can win the primary in a three-way race. Right. So sort of particularly since everyone has equal money and no one has, and no one has big name rec from being vice chair of the state party doesn't give, if you go on the street, if we went on the street in New Haven now and we asked people to name the 3 treasurer candidates,
Why do we elect a treasurer? Why do we care about treasurer? Treasurer, manages the pension funds, does S-sheets, which is stuff that's left over, no one claimed in the bank accounts. It has not been a stepping stone to higher office. I can't remember the last person. I'm thinking back to Hank Parker, and I can't remember anyone who went from state treasurer to another job.
Well, one of the major things about state treasurer is that Connecticut, a Bailey holdover for this, is that the state treasurer position is believed by the Democratic Party to be the one in which the Democrats should nominate an African American, guarantee that an African American is on the ticket.
Right, and that's been the case now for over 30 years.
The point is that, right, so for incredibly long time that has been the thing. And the question is, were those African American candidates perceived as actually being viable other statewide candidates, or were they just placeholders for the party to have diversity?
It's interesting you brought that up. So historically, at least 40 years, Jason, I think more, we've had a Black treasurer, and they've all been qualified, by the way. It's not that they're not qualified, but in the old days, party leaders had a lot of influence, correct, over who was on a ticket. There are pros and cons about that, but they made sure there was a balance, right? There was someone Black on the ticket, never anyone Latino. Now, one could argue there's a lot less ability for Lamont or the state party chair to say, we need to have balance, so we'll make sure someone Black's on a ticket.
But in the choice of who was, that tradition still clearly held up, because in the choice of who was willing to run for treasurer, when the vacancy came out early, Dita was willing to get in quickly because she ran last time and she doesn't care about this tradition at all. And it does, and as a tradition, it is definitely hard on rising communities if there are only 6 spots on a statewide ticket and one of them has to go to an African American. And I'm not saying I'm for it or against it, but that's the tradition. So she doesn't care about that. But when it came time to find the other candidates, the only people who thought about it seriously, the only people who were willing to sort of do it were 2 African Americans. And I think that's because of wanting to maintain that tradition. I think that in the SOTS race, what's sort of moving on a little bit, what's particularly interesting is, a first-term state rep was able to win the convention.
Right, Stephanie Thomas was the big story of the weekend, but unfortunately, we've run out of time in this segment. We've gone over. I really want to talk about that. We'll get back on it. Jason Paul, Jason the Greek, thanks so much for coming on LoveBabz, Love Talk.
Of course, thank you so much for having me.
And for giving us insight into this year's races. All right, well, you're listening to LoveBabz, Love Talk. I'm Paul Bass filling in for Babs Rawls Ivy, who's at Storytelling Conference in the coastal area of Connecticut. Have a wonderful week. She'll come back rested and on fire. And now we got our local correspondents reporting from Nashville, Tennessee. 3 independent reporters, WNHH reporters, Nora Grace Flood, Maya McFadden, and Laura Glesby, took the first weekend of direct flights from Tweed, New Haven's airport, Avello, to Nashville to see what it's like and what it could be like. Hey, folks, nice to see you. The sun's out there.
Yeah. We miss you.
How are things? How are things? Oh, you shouldn't be missing us. You're not having enough fun. You're missing us.
Am I out of frame?
So how's Nashville, folks? You having a good time?
The weather is nice. It's better than New Haven.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been exploring. So today we were thinking that we would go to a farmer's market.
We went to Nashville Farmer's Market, and it turned out to be a grocery store that wasn't open yet.
Not an actual farmer's market that we drove 20 minutes away from our Airbnb to find. So now instead we're in
what is Bicentennial?
No, this is not Bicentennial.
State Park. And it's like a World War II memorial, and also there's some other history like kind of carved on some stones here.
Yeah, a huge
museum at night.
Photos to show.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
What was it like flying out of Tweed to Nashville? How was the flight?
It was actually,
Maya's smiling. It sounds like there's something up with the flight.
no, it was actually like very fine, smooth.
yeah,
Lots of
the
empty
key word is
seats.
smooth.
Yeah,
Everything
Avello's
about
keyword.
Avello marketing
It's
is
like
centered
smooth.
around the word smooth. Like they give you little water bottles and they
say
brand
the water
it as
is
smooth water.
And it's from Hartford. The water is from Hartford.
The water's from Hartford.
But it's funny because everything I've heard about Avello, people are really psyched that all of a sudden you could fly to a dozen cities and before you could do none direct except Philly sometimes from New Haven. People are psyched about that, but it hasn't been smooth. Like I knew one person went to Florida and had to wait an extra day to fly back. His stuff kept getting canceled or delayed for hours because they're kind of rushing around.
I guess we just got lucky. The plane had seats for 150 people, but only 50 flew. So we were able to like move around the plane and sit together,
Yeah.
even though we didn't have seats assigned together. It was like kind of a good experience.
Oh, great.
I feel like that might also not be an Avello thing. I mean, I have no idea the whole like waiting thing, but I think during the pandemic, there's just been a lot of like flight crazy.
But also one thing friends of mine tell me they love about flying Avello is you get in and out so quick. Other airports, you have to go so long in advance. You wait in a line. It's hard to park. They you just zip in and out, right?
It took 10
Yeah, it was
minutes to check.
very
The
simple,
difference
yeah.
between going in Tweed and then getting to the Nashville airport, it was much more like quick in New Haven. And
There's like one way to get into the airport
Yeah,
versus
one
like a
entrance,
billion
one
ways to get out of Nashville.
Also, Paul, we do have a guest waiting here to speak with us for Word on the Street. So I think we should introduce her.
yes.
Oh, you have a guest for Word on the Street?
Yeah,
Yes. Were we supposed to be word on the
Oh, I
Street?
thought you were the guest. Oh, great. Who do you have on Word on the
No.
Street?
Real Nashville
Switching.
person.
Who's your guest?
Hi.
This is
Hello.
Tiandria.
Nice to meet you.
And you can hear Paul, right? You can hear Tiandria.
It's so nice. I'm sorry, your name's Chiantia?
Tiandria. Tiandria. Also known as T, right?
Yeah.
So nice to meet you.
So we have to ask you, what is the word on the street? The Nashville street. Or this park that we got to find the name of.
It said, you said, how do you describe like what's the word on the street? Like what's going on in Nashville?
Or what's going on with you?
Well, I'm boring. Sorry, I'm on nobody. So
Well, what are you out here doing today?
I'm
You were
on
running?
Yeah. Exercise.
What do you do for work?
I work in a restaurant.
Which restaurant?
Oh,
We're having trouble hearing the guest. Could you get the phone a little
Okay.
closer?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, it's close, but
So what?
I'm already little. But I'm just trying to like work on my legs and stuff. It's just something to do in the morning.
Yeah.
Just to
can you tell us the general vibe of the restaurant? What food do you?
it's like mostly like burgers, like wings. So it's like a little hangout spot basically. It's real nice.
Do you have any recommendations for eateries that people visiting Nashville should go
That's why I said,
to?
like, I'm from Nashville, but I mean I'm not like real familiar, but downtown period, like I'm just like this way. Not Broadway. That's what it's called. But, it's some close like to Broadway, but you can go down there and just every place down there is just very friendly. You have a nice experience.
Wow.
Have you traveled to other places or beyond?
I've been to Miami once. This was top to remember.
Do you like growing up here?
Yeah, I mean I guess.
Did you notice like a difference between Miami?
Yes,
and
that's what I'm saying.
Nashville?
Like we're friendly down here, and that's crazy because I don't see that we're friendly. We're friendly down here compared to other people. Like, yeah, like yeah.
And how old are you also?
I'm 20.
26. Okay. So have you lived anywhere else or it's always been
No,
Nashville?
it's just always been.
Wow. So I guess you don't necessarily have anything to compare it to. What are your favorite things to do around here?
Like a night owl. So like I do like cooking. Like 3,000 bars.
Oh, and could you speak up a little
I'm
bit? Sorry.
sorry.
It's always hard to hear over the
It's
phone.
I can't remember the street. It's like little hookah spots that you can go to. Just like have a little nice time.
Fun. And yeah, do you have any specific like career aspirations or anything like that? And what's your role at the restaurant? Are you a line cook or a waiter?
I do it all. So
Damn.
yeah. So but really I want to get into like lashes and stuff and like hair. So I'm just really just trying to take my time and try to build.
Do you do other people's like makeup and hair and stuff?
Yeah, I do my cousins. Let me try.
So why'd you choose to do a workout here this morning?
Feel good after this close to
I ask you a question about Nashville. Has it changed over the years? For those of us who don't live in Nashville, we're always told that the city's gotten bigger, more worldly, different from what its old image had been. Is that true?
It's like a city now. Like everywhere you go, it's nothing but condos. Like you're in a city. It don't look like Nashville, the country town. It looks better to me. I like it actually.
And what about the whole country music identity? Like I'm always hearing about musicians who are not country musicians who are settling in Nashville, and that there's this whole scene of music that has nothing to do with the Grand Ole Opry. Am I right about that? Or what's it like? What kind of music do you go out and hear?
I don't listen to country. I'm sorry. So
that's kind of what I'm saying.
Person. So
R&B, you said?
Yeah, I love R&B. Like the old classic. I don't really know about.
Do you find like R&B artists coming out here?
Yeah,
not so many. It's more like rap, like upcoming people. I mean, I'm not into like where I hear rap. So. But country people moving down here, I'm the type of just.
Can I ask you about one? My favorite up and coming artist in America is from Nashville.
Who?
But I'm guessing you might not know her. Joy Oladikin.
No.
Okay. She's touring the country right now, coming to our state from Nashville. Yeah.
No, I don't.
She's kind of R&B, hip hop, folk. She's kind of a mix of the whole thing. Yeah.
Can I ask, have you heard of New Haven before?
No.
Connecticut?
No. No. I really thought y'all was a scam, but no.
I'm like, have you heard of Connecticut?
I heard of Connecticut, but not New Haven. New Haven.
Yeah.
Well, it depends. People who are not from New Haven apparently say New Haven, and people who are from New Haven say New Haven.
Don't see the difference.
Yeah.
New Haven versus New Haven.
Can I ask you something else about Nashville and the tourists? So you work in a restaurant. A lot of people love to travel to Nashville. Do you see a lot of people every day who are not from Nashville? Is there kind of a different part of town where you see tourists more and more Nashville people?
That's why I'm saying, like, downtown, I don't even know the streets down there, and I've been down here my whole life. But, like, that's all you see is, like, the little, what is it called? The little pedal boats that people be on.
Oh, like the party bus things? We have those in New Haven.
So everybody who
that way. It's a real way. Do you get annoyed by
Interesting.
those, like, party bike situations?
Yeah.
do I know about?
Do you get annoyed by them?
I know.
Okay.
I love it.
Have you been on one?
I've been on one.
Wait, please
fun.
tell us about the experience.
It's fun. It's the one like you sit down and you pedal or whatever. You just drink and they just drive around the whole Nashville. Well, not the whole Nashville, the whole downtown. It's a fun experience.
Are they like talking to you guys, like telling you history about Nashville or anything like that?
No, I think this is just like you listen to. They just play music and you just bat with your friends, basically.
How did it come about that you went on that? Like who?
It's a little.
Like under what circumstances do people get on the party bus?
Just to have fun.
Yeah.
Like want to go out and party? Hey, let's have fun. That's like
I will admit that I read an article about the party bus in Nashville in the New York Times and how there are so many of them that it's making some people crazy in Nashville because they say it's so loud and it doesn't just stay downtown and it goes to 2 a.m. Is that just old folks? That's just like old people who are being stick in the mud, not having fun, or what do you think?
Yeah, that has to be like the old people.
Yeah. Wait, that's actually
There are a lot of
so
old
when we
people in
went to
Nashville.
Lower Broadway, it seemed like a pretty good mix of like older people and young people, like all going to the same bars and doing the same stuff. It's not like a thing.
So I don't think it's like Demar, wherever tells you like where Vibes and 3,000 bar, that's like where the young like guys will be down there. Like everybody.
With the old people.
Or
Like
the
that.
old people who have a problem with the loud music and stuff, but
So you happy in Nashville? Fun place to live? Fun place to grow up?
yeah, it is. Very country.
Do you feel like a lot of things like happen? Like, is there always something to go to? Like,
No, I wouldn't say we have like big. Cause I'm a homebody now, so like I don't go out to like most of the parties they be having. So,
Is there anywhere else that you want to move one day, or could you see yourself staying here indefinitely? Yeah, Miami. Yeah, that I'm like, what is it like to live in a landlocked state?
How is it down there? Like, is it cold? Is it hot?
It depends. It changes in the weather.
It's
like,
it's
depending on the
super
season.
schizophrenic.
So wait, I'm wondering about the weather here though. Like, do you feel like it's a good like place for you weather-wise, or would you rather be somewhere more hot?
No, this is
More
fine.
hot. It's like 90 degrees out, bro.
Literally go through this.
And could you tell us about what the rest of your day looks like? What are you doing from here on out?
I gotta go to work, so that's what my day consists of. Is me working.
What time do you get off? Oh, that's fun. What will you do after work?
I pick my son. Whatever he wants to do.
How old is he?
Yeah.
4.
Wait, what are some places that you take your son around?
Like the zoo, it's like a little spot, urban air. Yeah. That's why I'm saying they don't really have like good little vibe things where you can just take your kids. But that's what I'm saying. You gotta most of the time you gotta wait till the summer with water parks open.
How about Mother's Day? Did you do anything for Mother's Day?
I worked Mother's Day.
Oh.
And who was watching? Who was watching the kid?
His dad.
Okay, well, it was really nice to meet you. My station manager's telling me it's time for station ID. I hope you have a great run, a great rest of your day. Thanks for letting us know about Nashville. And we're going to be friends now because we got the airlines. You're going to see more people at the burger joint and in the park from New Haven.
We can send you the link if you want.
Yeah, send me the link because it's fine. This is my first time. I'm sorry I couldn't just give you guys everything about Nashville.
No, thank you so
Perfect.
And we got to run now. I want to thank Nora and Maya and Laura for taking that trip to Nashville. I can't wait. I hope you have a great trip back, a great last part of your day. And I look forward to reading and hearing all about your trip to Nashville from New Haven. You're the first crew coming from our city to our new friends.
We're glad to be here. We'll see you tomorrow.
All right. Thanks, folks. And Harry Dross, I'm going to let people know you're listening to LoveBabz Love Talk at WNHHFM 103.5. I'm going to be off the second hour. We're going to play a greatest hit. I'll be back tomorrow because all week I'm filling in along with Nora for Bowser Rolls Ivy. Any final words you want to hear, Harry, before I?
No, you made it sound like their trip to Nashville was like man's first steps on the moon.
Yeah, I know, but it's kind of interesting that you could fly right down to Nashville now from New Haven. I mean, that's a game changer. I'm just wondering what. I was surprised there were only 50 people on the flight, though. I thought those tickets were going fast.
You know, I think it's still a struggle to get people to fly from Tweed. Actually, Karen and I just bought our tickets to fly from Tweed for the first time too.
Where are you going and when?
October, we'll be going to South Carolina. So when we're going on Avello, so.
Excellent. That's so nice, Harry.
I'm gonna try it out, you know. instead of going through the normal channels.
And then we'll be hearing more from Nora and Maya and Laura when they get back tonight. They're going to write an article about the Independent and lots of photos about the maiden voyage to the moon.
And I like your first half of the hour.
Oh, thank you.
I love politics, so I'm a
He's a
politics
junkie.
junkie.
He's a
Yeah.
politics junkie. He's a
Yeah,
numbers
yeah.
guy. And actually, I hadn't thought about what he said about, we always talk about the Democrats having this lock on the cities and they get like an 18 to 21,000 vote margin to begin with from New Haven. But he was talking about the old Republican Party had this lock on the Gold Coast, the New Canaan, Greenwich, and they need to get that back. So that was kind of interesting.
Well, it's a totally different. I mean, when you look at the Trump,
right? He has no.
There's just no figuring out.
And also Lamont, who's more Greenwich than Lamont? He's from Greenwich. He's inherited money. He doesn't believe in the estate tax. I mean, geez.
Yeah, Lamont's a totally different animal, and I think he benefited from all the Trump stuff.
Yeah, but not this year. But he benefits from being an incumbent, I believe. This year.
Well, he also benefits from,
money.
The federal government being
showering money. It's like a thunderstorm of dollar bills.
Yeah, so he's going, hey, we have a surplus. Yeah, but the federal government isn't going to do that, and you're giving us a
but by that time the election's over.
I know.
You're 25. Harry, you better load up and get some extra gas. I think it's December 7th. They're waiting a few weeks after the election, and then this phony 25-cent gas tax is going out the window.
Right. And imagine, you're still paying $4.20. So add that tax.
But they're actually having a press conference today, Harry, the governor, about look what great tax cutters we are. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
I guess that's elections. You go to see what your biggest vulnerability and you run hard on that. So Democrats this year are running this phony tax cutters.
It's not honest. I was it's honest, Paul. They did do the tax cut.
But they didn't. They did a phony small thing that didn't matter to anyone, and it hamstrung fulfilling their own priorities. Daycare center is going to close. Yeah,
right. It's honest enough to say it.
Okay.
Right? So, and it's funny because this weekend I was reading Socrates and Plato and all that stuff.
You were?
Yeah. Don't ask me why. I do this sometimes, right? But I was stuck on Plato's cave, right? And it's a perfect depiction of what's going on now in the media and everything. People are entranced by the projection they see on the wall.
Yeah.
And they never go up to see the light themselves. I
have to admit, that's the only thing I ever understood about Plato. This idea that you're seeing the image of something projected on a wall instead of the reality of what you're seeing. You're based on the image when you're seeing what reality is.
And I was looking at that, and it's such a sad predicament that we're all in, that we're at the mercy of these media companies that feed us information. And unless you go up to the light yourself, you'll never.
And you and I agree with Donald Trump that we have to expand the definition of media company. There's no bigger media company now than Facebook and Twitter and TikTok, and they should be regulated the way that newspapers are. If they run something libelous, they should be sued for libel because they're reaching more people than a newspaper. They're making more money than the news organizations, and they're pretending they're not publishers. They say, platform.
Here's the thing about the Twitter, right? And I have agreed that they should be treated as basically media publications, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, the reason they needed to be treated that way is because they were acting as publishers. Now, with Elon Musk getting in there, if he doesn't act like a publisher and he allows free speech.
You see, that's where I don't agree with you, and I agreed with Trump. Because if you have a newspaper, you put letters to the editor. But you can be sued if someone writes a letter and says, Harry did this terrible crime that Harry didn't do. Because you have to be responsible if you're making money off of publishing stuff that people read. I don't think they ever needed those breaks. I think it's because they had friends in Washington, especially Democrats, who let them make more money without the responsibility. and they have a special break. They get to make more money than news organizations printing more.
But as long as they don't decide whose speech is good speech or bad speech,
but they're still making the money on it.
They still make the money, but
why should they be able to make money with? Why should they make money printing libel?
They're not.
Why should they? They are. If they print Harry, if they say Harry Drost committed this crime that Harry never committed, they can make money by getting people to publish that, and they can get so much more money than the New York Times or the New Haven Register or the Independent can make from running that. And yet they don't have to go by the same rules.
You're right, but it's a consequence of their business, right? The money that they make.
Consequence of politics.
Well, but the thing is that the people who publish the lie, they should be liable, not.
But they're not making the money on it. Facebook is. Twitter is. Just like let's say that person wrote that thing about Harry in a letter to the editor, to the New Haven Register, and they published a letter to the editor, a lie about Harry that can ruin your life. The New Haven Register under libel law is responsible for not publishing that lie to destroy your life because they're making money on it and they should have some responsibility. Facebook and Twitter make more money by publishing that.
I agree, but disagree with you, Paul, because see, I don't think Trump should be able to sue if
he wanted to get rid of their special permission.
Right, but I don't think right now he wants to sue for libel, right? Because everything they wrote about him for 4 years has turned out to be a lie.
He should be allowed to go libel, and he said things that were libelous about people that he should.
Right, but you see, that's the thing. But him saying it, you could sue him personally. Twitter actually controlling the information is where they went wrong. See, that's where they could.
So you're going back to the permission. I always felt that was where I disagree with you. So I think at the beginning they shouldn't have had that out. If the Hartford Courant said,
"Oh, I know," but they did
just let the Hartford Courant said, "We'll let anybody say whatever they want. We won't censor anybody." They still should be sued if they're making money because a lot of people buy it to read the horrible things somebody said about Harry.
But they're legit news.
But you see, I would argue that Facebook, Twitter have become more the legit news. More people get their news from those places.
All the garbage that they put out.
I know because they get away with it, and more people read it. Okay. Hey, I got to go cover some real news, which is the history walking.
And I just want to do this real quick, Paul, because and I'll take it off really fast. Do you see that?
Harry, is this something you found on the dark web? Plato's Cave.
That's right. Ain't that cool?
That's very cool, Harry. Well, I think you're cool. I love talking to you. And I'm sorry I got to run cover. Can't do this. We will do the full 2 hours the rest of the week. I'm going to do 2 hours tomorrow from the studio. I'll see you there. Nora is going to be the first hour Wednesday through Friday. I'll be the second. So thanks. We're going to do our best. There's no replacing Babz. Babz is sui generis, the best in the business. But so are you. And thanks for giving me the opportunity to sit in on LoveBabz LoveTalk today. And we'll see you tomorrow.
All right. So Nora's going to do Wednesday and Thursday, right?
From 9 to 10, and I'll do 10 to 11.
Right.
And tomorrow I'm going to do 9 to 11. I'll see you in the studio. We're going to have a mix of guests and those music playlists, if that's okay. All right. We'll take it out the Afro-Semitic experience performing I Wish I Knew How It'd Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. It's Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day and all night on WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.